Hello everyone, and welcome to this video on Pluto in the 4th house in astrology. I'm Cassandra the Saffron Sage, helping you use astrology to evolve, and today we are talking about what happens when you have Pluto in the 4th house in your natal chart. So Pluto is the planet of power and transformation, and the 4th house is the house of home, family, nurturing, and what we need to feel okay. It's like our foundation in life. So in this video, first we're going to talk about the meaning of Pluto and the mythology behind it. Then we're going to go into what it means, what the 4th house means, and then we'll talk about what the actual meaning of this placement when Pluto is in the 4th house. So let's get into it. Pluto is the god of the underworld, watcher of departed souls. And, I do have some notes because I did some research into this to make these videos. So the most common Pluto story is the Persephone myth, which is the story of how he kidnaps Persephone, takes her to the underworld, and then her mom, Demeter or Ceres, depending on which mythology you follow, she gets upset. She's devastated at the loss of her daughter, comes to get her back. And then Pluto tricks Persephone, so the story goes, into eating some pomegranate seeds, not knowing that each seed she ate kept her in the underworld for a certain amount of time. So Pluto before that had agreed to give her back. And then at the time he gave her back, because she had eaten those seeds, he didn't have to give her back forever. So now Persephone goes, lives with her mom above ground 6 months of the year. This is when we have spring, and goes down into the underworld the other 6 months. And this is when we have winter, because Demeter, who harvests the crops and nurtures, the nurturer, right? She is so devastated without her daughter that she doesn't do her work. So this is how the myth goes. And there are a couple things about this myth that I didn't know that I came across in my research. One is that the reason Pluto took Persephone in the first place was because Cupid shot a dart at him. So Cupid shot a dart at Pluto, Lord of the Underworld, because he didn't want him to be lonely. And so that happened. Another thing that I didn't know either is that Persephone was actually Pluto's niece, because Pluto and Ceres were brother and sister. So those are some little details that are just interesting. And one other detail about this story that is interesting is that basically some versions of the story say that Persephone was kidnapped. Others say that she went willingly. And so this is the thing about astrology and mythology, is that sometimes it depends upon which myth you read. But the general archetype of the story is the same. Plutonic love equals possession, right? So that's one of the little morals here of the story. But another really significant moral of this story that really puts into perspective how we can best use Pluto for the evolutionary side is going to be the fact that the Persephone story isn't just a myth about a little girl who gets kidnapped. It's about the process of going from maiden to mother to crown, the process of maturing and becoming an adult woman, and how that process involves being the queen of our own underworld. And I think that's true man or woman, but really Persephone doesn't just get kidnapped and then she's stuck and she's a victim forever. She becomes queen of the underworld, and the underworld being a metaphor for our subconscious mind. So it's about how if we can harness our subconscious mind, if we can understand it, if we can rise above it, this is true maturity and true empowerment, true transformation. So that being said, let's see if there's some other details here that I missed. One is that Pluto is also known as the god of wealth, the bringer of wealth, because jewels and diamonds come from underground. It's Pluto in Roman mythology, Hades in Greek mythology, and a lot of my research was from Mythopedia. Okay, and then Pluto's identity was like a mix of Hades plus Pluton, which was a Pluton also known as Dispater. had power over the underworld and mineral wealth. The underworld being the resting place for departed souls. So the family tree here, Pluto's dad was Saturn, brother was Jupiter, and other brother was Poseidon, sisters were Ceres, Juno, and Vesta. Okay, so that is what I have on Pluto as far as the myth and the story and the legend. There's a little bit more on Pluto, but that's the one I focused on for these videos, this series. And then just to define what Pluto is as a planet, what it means in astrology. By sign, Pluto represents generational themes because it stays in a sign for so long that it's not a personal planet. So the transit of Pluto through a sign is between 14 and 30 years. And because it moves so slowly, these transits really do correspond with the generations. So whatever generation you were born in, you're going to have the same Pluto as everyone else in that generation. And it's like, this is what this generation came to transform. We can talk more about that in another video if you guys want. By house, this is where Pluto gets really juicy because those generational themes are interesting, but they're not personal. It gets personal where you have it in your chart by house. So this is where we're going to see how you moved through a past life. What were those themes and what past life themes are you automatically pulled toward in this life? I've always felt like Pluto was an anchor, even though it's a small planet, even though it's way, way, way out there. Pluto has always felt intuitively like an anchor in the chart to me. And the more I've researched it, the more I've understood why, because we are really, Pluto, the planet of possession, of ownership. The house that we have Pluto is kind of one of our really natural comfort zones in a way. And the opposite house, Jeffrey Wolf Green calls the polarity point. So this is the point directly opposite your Pluto. And this is our soul evolution in this life if we choose to embrace it and accept it. So it's how we transform. Pluto is where we have the most potential to transform. And, for different people, that transformation is going to it can be positive or negative. And not everyone embraces their evolutionary lesson. So not everyone has a rags to riches story, but if you have Pluto in your second house, you could. So that's a little bit more about the Pluto as a planet and what it means. So now we're going to move on to getting into the fun stuff here. Pluto, the nature of the fourth house. The fourth house in the astrology chart begins the IC. A point in the chart, it's the bottom of the chart. It represents like our family life, our sort of beginnings in life, our sense of personal security, what makes us feel like we are at home, how we reacted to our early environment, and, home, private things. It's at the bottom of the chart. It's the most hidden place in the chart. Another thing about the fourth house is that it is an angular house. That IC is one angle. So the angles being important, the houses that are angular also being important. As far as accidental dignity, which is like how powerful a planet is when it is in a house, if you have Pluto in the fourth house, that means you have strong accidental dignity from your Pluto. So it automatically means your Pluto point, your Pluto placement in your chart, it is stronger. Now that doesn't always mean better, because if your planet is kind of messed up or dysfunctional or, has problems associated with it and it's in an angular house, those problems will also be stronger. So this all depends upon like specific stuff with your natal chart. But the angular houses are significant. So having Pluto in the fourth house automatically means that you might relate to your Pluto a little bit more than someone who doesn't have it there, or just that Pluto type themes, Pluto type transformations are more significant to you. The fourth house really signifies home, family, our upbringing, our own emotional security, our foundations in life. It can represent our physical home, what makes us feel at home, what we're like in private, what we're like behind closed doors, the parts of ourselves we don't really let other people see. If you think about when you walk in your house and you shut the door behind you and you're by yourself, that person who you are in that scenario, that's in your fourth house. So now that we know what Pluto means, what the mythology is, and what the fourth house means, let's move on to what it means if you have Pluto in the fourth house. If you have Pluto in the fourth house in your astrology chart, for you, it's all about the emotional security. So people with this placement oftentimes will feel that their parents did not meet their needs. Now, this can go a few different ways. While some people, it's because of a true lack by the parent, while some others it may not. And that's because what happens is you incarnate with all these memories of parents who did not support you emotionally. And because of that, in this life, there's a sensitivity when that happens. There's a sensitivity when your mom or your dad can't fulfill one of your emotional needs. And as children, we don't know what our evolutionary lessons are, so we don't really have a whole lot we can do about it when we're younger. But this can be something like a parent who did not, wasn't there for you in ways you needed them to be emotionally. It could also be a parent who is smothering and overbearing and kind of doesn't let their child grow up, or tries to keep the person. Your parent would have tried to keep you in a position where you needed them, and would continue even as you aged to try to sort of manipulate the situation so they could have the upper hand and they could be in control. This can manifest in very different ways, but I do want to say that there's a range here, a very wide range, right? So for some people, it's going to be, I had a great childhood, but then even if your parents both worked full time, as a child with this placement, you could feel neglected because your parents weren't there. Or you could have other situations where your parent wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong, but it felt like it to you as the child with this placement, with a much more strong sensitivity to whether your parents were there for you or not. Now, occasionally this can come up in just the whole family of origin, right? Like feeling this way about a sibling where, because my sister gets all the attention, nobody listened to me or nobody cared about me or, stuff like that. But the thing that's interesting about this is, number one, just because you don't have Pluto in the fourth house, that doesn't mean everyone else's parents were always there for them. What it means is it's your evolutionary lesson to rise above emotional dependence. And because of that, in early life, someone with this placement will have lots of situations where they feel let down by the people who maybe were supposed to be there for them. Now, what happens with every Pluto is there's sort of like this crisis, this catastrophe, this spiritual crisis where these things happen, right? And the more that you move toward that Pluto, the more likely you are to end up in sort of a emotional upheaval in some way. Emotional, I don't want to say breakdown, but every Pluto house has its crisis. And the Pluto fourth house crisis is the emotional security, the feeling of people aren't there for me. And when that happens, when those situations happen, feeling like it's a really big deal, going through this whole emotional thing about it. And then what can happen for these people is they can end up being very out of touch with their emotions. One of the reactions to this Pluto is to protect and to not want to ever feel vulnerable. Okay, so it can go both ways, where either, that Pluto fourth house person could end up being very dependent upon people still and keep having the lessons. And again, this can show up in relationships too, especially the earlier ones, where you will develop a relationship based on wanting them to be there for you. They will not meet those needs. And so sometimes that can be like having partners who are just super invalidating to your emotions in every possible way. And it can go the opposite way too, where having Pluto in the fourth house, you could actually find yourself sort of playing out the dynamic of wanting to be the one in control. That can be in romantic relationships or friendships, where it's like by attracting people who are more vulnerable, especially people who have unresolved childhood trauma, it's like you end up playing the part of the hero, and it's almost this unconscious protection mechanism where it's like, if you're the needy one, then no one can ever hurt me, right? And so there's this protection that can come up from this placement. So another aspect of the needs that aren't met in childhood here is people not seeing your individuality. So Pluto fourth house people could have parents who you feel like they didn't even see who you are. They don't even know who you are. Or parents who maybe wanted you to play a certain role in life, and that's not who you actually are, right? Parents who had maybe a controlling version of you, right? It's like you have to be who they want you to be, kind of. This is another dynamic that can show up here. And the reason really here is that it's because for people with this placement in this life, it's about learning to supply your own inner strength. So it's right for you to find the emotional security that you need from within. Now that's true for everyone, but for people with this Pluto, this is the evolutionary lesson. And that polarity point in that 10th house is what is the vehicle. So it's very likely that most Pluto fourth house people are going to play out the evolution, if you're stepping into the healing and the positive transformation of this placement through work, through work and career and stepping up and being empowered and being in control in career and having confidence. And so instead of trying to control your emotions or trying to control other people and their emotions even. So this is another challenge for this Pluto fourth house placement is sometimes they want to tell everyone around them what to do. They want to be the one like going around with their family and telling them like what they need to do and how they need to do it. And for the Pluto fourth house person, this isn't really the path toward the evolution. It's a step because they're trying to be in control, and that is a part of how to harness this Pluto. But instead of being in control of what other people do, it's about learning how to put all of that power on yourself and allow yourself a healthy, balanced experience of vulnerability. And also by supplying your own emotional needs. If you find yourself in that situation where you're trying to control your environment, you're trying to make the people in your life do certain things, oftentimes it's like you'll feel like you're doing it to help them. It's really going to feel like, I know this is for their own good. So that's just something to watch out for here. So part of the process to work with this placement is to learn how to feel your emotions. If you have at all been working on allowing to feel your feelings with this placement, you are on the right track. And just know that this process may be a challenge here, and that, there's a lot to gain by letting yourself explore vulnerability, expressing your feelings, learning how to be open. And really, it's not necessarily about like expressing your feelings so the other person can hear you or so that you'll finally be understood. It's about learning to identify the root cause of the emotion, right? So if you are upset, what actually upset you? If you are having a day at work where you just can't get anything done and you're so frustrated, what happened that morning or that night with your partner or with something else, right? So there's a real tendency with this placement to not know that stuff unless you try to dig for it. This Pluto placement can bring an intensity to the emotions. It can also bring a compulsion to act on every single feeling you have. Like, I had a feeling, I have to go do something about it. And so it's good to cultivate an ability to sit with a feeling, learn to identify that root cause so that they're not driving you to kind of do things that are not necessarily things you even want or need to do sometimes. So if you do find that you relate to having this like spiritual crisis of emotion, crisis of vulnerability, this is probably going to show up as like feeling like you need to throw a fit or have some kind of display of emotion that's like a big, like dramatic almost, or just having intense emotions and kind of having them well up. Usually there's two things that will bring this up from this past life. One is life getting stale or boring. You need to make a change. Two, something triggers the past life memory of someone not being there for you emotionally. So those are the two things to kind of think about if you're trying to work with this placement, if you're trying to work with this energy. Okay, so another very interesting thing about this placement is some people with this placement don't fully feel comfortable with their gender. And the reason why is that sometimes people with this Pluto in their previous life before this one, they were the other gender. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily mean in this life you're going to have a gender change. Usually it's more about not relating to every single aspect of the gender role that you have. So this can be like a man who, is manly, but then like has some hobbies that mostly women like. Or a woman who is like really wants like a higher powered career woman who is not going to stop working because she's really happy with that. And so usually there's just like one thing that makes you relate more to the other gender. You can still be beautiful. You can still be handsome if you're a guy. It doesn't necessarily mean you're effeminate or you're too masculine, but women with this placement might find that there's something masculine about them. Men with this placement might find that there is something feminine about them. Now, again, this doesn't mean you can't be perfect the way you are. This doesn't mean you're wrong or anything. And it doesn't feel like anything would be solved with this placement by necessarily trying to change that about yourself. This to me feels like it's about not fully feeling like you know how to wear this role, this gender role in this life yet. And so that is one thing to know. Another thing to know about this placement is it is right for you in this life to learn how to know and trust yourself. It is also not uncommon for people with Pluto in the fourth house to be suspicious of others. The polarity point of this Pluto, the thing to focus on to kind of get you out of some of the, running yourself back into those past life patterns is that 10th house of work. Now, this does not mean you have to have a full-time job if you have this placement, but many people with this placement will find that they have happiness, and just there's a healing or a balance that comes in life when you are working in a position that is good for you, that you're able to like have some power and control, you're able to make your own decisions, and there is a definite shift that can happen for Pluto 10th house people when they are in the right career or when they are focusing on, being the best they can in career. But it can also be some of the more 10th house things that are not always just having a job as much as how you show up in the world, having big goals that you're willing to make sacrifices for, being able to step up to the responsibility. It's about duty, obligation, sacrifice, being able to know what is worth sacrificing for, setting those goals. And some of those goals could be family oriented. This doesn't just have to be career, but even in family, it's going to be about like being able to rise to some kind of challenge and feel good about yourself in that role where you get to be responsible for how you show up. Let me just say, I'm not saying this because you guys are responsible and you need to learn responsibility. Everyone needs to learn accountability and responsibility. But for Pluto in the fourth house, if you focus on learning this is going to bring you a lot more bang for your buck as far as what you get out of it, because there is so much to be gained by accessing and harnessing that polarity point. So this is really all about letting go of any feeling you have that someone else will do something for you, and really being able to become the person through career or otherwise who knows that if you want something in life, you have everything within you to go get it. If you have a feeling in life that you need to feel or you want to feel, or you want validation for your emotions, that you are the one who is capable of creating that validation for yourself. Some of the things you can experience with this placement, once you have integrated this lesson, is you can really start feeling like you, number one, see your parents as people, especially for those who, had the parents who worked full time and like didn't necessarily, really try to neglect you, but those feelings came in, seeing your parents as the people who were just doing what they had to do instead of something you felt personally hurt by. Now, this is not to negate or deny or overstep any fourth house Pluto people out there who had horrendous, situations. It's going to vary depending on who you are watching this placement, watching this video. But, especially for the people who were more sensitive and had parents who tried to love you, you can really start to see, if you work on this, again, your parents as people who were just doing what they had to do. And for the people who have maybe more challenging situations, more difficulties, more abusive type situations that they are looking back on, there is still a potential to see your parents still as people who did what they had to do. And I'm not going to, say you have to feel that way, because that's up to you. Whatever you want to feel is what you want to feel. I'm not here to tell you what to feel or what attitude to have, especially because I don't know all your individual situations. But there's a way to heal, okay? No matter what your family life was. With Pluto in the 4th house, there's a way to heal the powerlessness you felt around, not getting your needs met as a child. And the more that you work toward responsibility, sacrifice, duty, being the person to create the life you want, we are the ones we've been waiting for. That whole sentiment for Pluto 4th house, that has to be your motto, especially when it comes to emotions. Now, once you have integrated this lesson, or at least begun that transformation process, you have the ability to help people overcome their emotional challenges, their emotional vulnerability and insecurity in an extremely powerful way. You have that gift, right? You've alchemized that energy, and you will be able to help people in that way more than anyone else could. So having worked on this, you really can help people release their emotional neediness and become more emotionally balanced. And you can also integrate your masculine and feminine, especially if you resonated a lot with that part of the video. Some other things that Pluto in the 4th house can represent, one of them is moving, because the 4th house rules the home. And so people with this placement can have very significant transitions with their living situation. They can have times in life where they're working toward remodeling or building a home or something else related to moving that's really important, right? So you can have a phase of life where you're saving up to buy a house, or a phase of life where you move from one neighborhood to a totally different neighborhood. That's one way this can show up, is like the place you end up living as an adult is so different from where you came from. So that's, again, one way it can show up. You can also do things like related to helping your parents move, or doing things related to, again, remodeling, real estate, buying a house, and that this topic in your life could be somehow more significant, especially in terms of transformation. So for some people, maybe they really like reorganizing. You can actually, this is one thing, Pluto in the 4th house, if you need an energy shift, for you personally, getting rid of something in your house that you no longer want is going to be more helpful, because that transformation in that 4th house, Pluto transforms through destroying. It's where we naturally purge, and it's where we can benefit if we release. So letting go of old things from the home that are not needed anymore, that kind of thing you can gain a lot from. So that is what I have for this placement of Pluto in the 4th house. Just to recap, it is all about your home, your family life, your emotional security, and finding what you need to create that emotional security from within. The polarity point for this Pluto is going to be the evolution, that 10th house of career responsibility, really embracing the motto of I'm the one I've been waiting for, really stepping up to create the life you want, not waiting for anyone else to come save you, being your own savior, being your own hero. That is what this placement is all about. Challenges, if you are falling back into those 4th house Pluto habits, are avoiding feeling your emotions, repressing them, doing things where you have the upper hand and don't feel vulnerable, not letting people see how you feel, and sometimes even trying to control other people, or, putting a little bit too much emotional pressure on people, just depending on where you are in the spectrum of this placement. So that is what I have for this video. Let me know in a comment below if it resonated. And I'm currently doing a reading sale. Readings are 50% off through Friday, the 27th of May. Click the link below if you want to get 50% off a consultation. And if you're watching this after, you can join my email list, get my free Midheaven guide, and then you will always be notified every time I have a sale in the future. So that is all I have for this video, and let me know in a comment below whether it resonated, what you think, how you feel. I always love hearing from you if you have suggestions for other videos, and I will see you guys in the next video.